Hey, Sidarta, thank you for joining me on Turtlecast here. This is this is frankly a topic a lot of people wonder, like, what when we focus on data, why would we be talking about the dream state? And from my own personal experience and how I view the world, is that we spend about 55% of our lives awake, living in the physical, taking that as our stimuli and input. And for majority of us, that's all we tend to reflect on is the physical aspects of what are happening. But that other 45%, when our subconscious and conscious are interlinked when we're sleeping, many people don't pay attention to. But there's a great body of knowledge and learning that can come from that 45% of our life. So, when I thought about this, if I'm living even to 100 years, I've only really lived 55 of those years because I've missed the other 45 when my eyes were closed and I was laying down and resting. But it's such a major function of my emotional states, my psyche, all those other things that really determine how I operate in what I would say the 55%, the very physical world. And you wrote this book, The Oracle of Night, and I was thinking about it. There's so much historical data in context around dreaming. And dreaming was actually used as a tool where the data of the subconscious or unconscious state, whichever one you want to choose to do, whether you're Freudian or not, that information was not taken very lightly. It was an extremely serious event that demanded a lot of, interpretation. And that interpretation was the definition of many empires. It was the definition of how people chose to create some of our greatest technological breakthroughs. And there's been a drop off in that over time. And I know I'm monologuing here, but I'm just kind of teeing you up. I want to focus on why there has been a drop off and why I frankly think that the data of dreams, people don't see the value in it anymore. And it's actually slowed the growth, our consciousness growth in our ethics and morals and how we view and respect other human beings. But technology has completely superseded that, where we've put all of our weight and all of our value into something very external, but choose not to focus introspectively on the self. So, to kick it off, what is a dream? How do you define it? Right? And then where does that lead us in terms of analysis and the history of that very special thing, that 45% of our life? I'll stop talking now.
Well, thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to release the book in English now and engage in this dialogue. Why is it that dreams were so important for our ancestors, and until very recently in all countries in the world? And then the interest in dreams dropped off so dramatically, and they stopped being used to guide us in any way in our private lives, in our public lives, states, businesses. The development of capitalism decoupled from dreaming to a large extent. Not entirely, not completely, because people continue to dream and they continue to come up with new ideas during dreams, and this continues to percolate into society. But it's completely pale compared to what it was a few hundred years ago. And one thing I like to speculate is that somehow this probabilistic oracle, this neurobiological machine that somehow simulates possible futures, something that was very useful throughout the Paleolithic, throughout the ancient times, and until recently, until maybe 500 years ago. This was substituted to a large extent by technical knowledge, by knowledge that allows us to predict things in a logical, mathematical manner and not in a fuzzy, somehow sketched manner, which is what dreams provide. But this happened at the expense of our sensibility. So science is really good for what it can see and measure and predict, and it keeps expanding very fast and faster and faster. But it misses this other realm of integration of probabilities and of really screening the environment for cues that can produce a very compelling image, like in a dream, that can propel people forward. And surely that's what happened as our ancestors left the cave, and we got so fast to the point where we are at now. And somehow we forgot that dreams were important for that. And this may be related to our to this weird feeling of the 21st century, which is everything is possible, and still uh, there's no future. What is it's a mix of of notions that is it's a paradox. If we
Yeah.
can do so much, then there should be a fantastic future for all sentient beings. And if we're not seeing that future, maybe it's because we're constantly losing our time and space to sleep and dream and share those dreams with others.
Do you know, I think that's interesting because, in the book, you talked about dreaming of bone and stone when we talked about, that very Paleolithic, caveman-esque dream state. But there's some interesting things that happen here, right? You go from that into like animal husbandry, right? And like bringing wolves in to get the right genetic one. Some sort of stimulus is coming in and creating what seems to be a fuzzy world, right? When I have a dream, it doesn't have the same sort of brightness of color if I were walking around in daylight, but it carries the same color, it carries the same depth of effect. But because I'm at this point where, like, man, I didn't feel like I slept very long. Well, in the very physical sense for the self, maybe I was sleeping for 8 hours, but the dream could feel much, much longer or much, much shorter. So I have a function of like time dilation. So I'm put into a place where I can learn very extensive scenarios, emotional inputs, a course of logic. And if I review that, I have the ability to take in so much catalyst in such a brief amount of time, much more than I could ever do in the waking state. So when people focus on those dreams, and I'm reading your book, it affords them the opportunity to take so much learning element in much quicker than the outside. So if they only wrote this down and reviewed it for themselves, they could deal with many personal traumas, social traumas, political traumas or physical traumas that may be happening in their lives, because you're essentially getting this world, and some people want to be about this, like a virtual reality where they can go in and actually test the emotions, the catalyst, the aspects of it, and then you can bring it over to the real world. And so next time you're teed up with that specific thing, you'd be like, I know how to handle this. And the reason I say that, because when you spoke about the two big projects of Dream Bank and whatever the one was, I'm forgetting about it, where they were dealing with Vietnam War vets and their dreams, there are many thematic similarities between individuals. All of us have different aspects how we go about our life. We all have different problems to some sort of variance, but the general theme of those problems, the themes of our learning, are pretty much the same. And this is just my theory here, is that specific data of these dream sets is actually telling us that the state of our evolution, whether it be our consciousness or our ethics or morals, whatever it might be, are generally, for the aggregate of us, all at the same place at the same time. When you go into a classroom, we're all going to interpret a book a different way. People interpret the Bible, Vedic scripts, anything in their own way, but it's still a shared general theme. And I think that's what's happening with the dream state itself. So when I look at these larger data sets of people that choose to put their dreams into this so it can be analyzed, the commonality is there because I think we're all really at the same evolutionary state of where we are as a collective. And we're trying to work our way out of that, but introspection is going to be the key. And I feel like this is the number one most understudied, most underutilized tool that we have. And it's so prevalent in absolutely everyone's life. Like my dog's dream. Like, why is no one focusing on that? So there's something to be said here about learning when we're sleeping. And I think that we've put so much faith into technology that it is far evolved and far surpassed us for technology's sake, but not for humanity's sake. And I think what you are doing in your research in your book creates a bridge of technology by using data, using these subsets, and bringing it together with the development of a human being at the same time. And I think that's where something beautiful happens. And a lot of people have really missed that a great part of our history, even where you are currently down in South America, dreams were a great foundation of those cultures. They are
Absolutely.
they're foundational items that have built up civilizations. You know,
Absolutely.
you wrote you call it the Oracle of Night, but that's for the self. But think about kings and emperors, right? And I'll share this part of the book. Alexander the Great first went to, like the Oracle of Delphi, and then he had the Oracle of Siwa. So regardless of where he was in his campaigns, there was still someone of an external sense, a shamanic sense, whatever it might have been, helping guide and interpret that individual. That individual had massive, massive influence all over the world. Like the dream itself is a key driver for how human beings develop and create choices. And those choices have direct effects on our physical world. So why have we been ignoring that, Siddhartha? Why has there been such a decline?
Well, we have to see that the role that dreams fulfilled in those societies is now fulfilled by a variety of different mechanisms. And these roles were really about having ideas pop out, come from the unconscious into the conscious mind, and then presented to other people, be interpreted to us, generate a decision. So this is a very ancient routine that was performed in Sumeria, in Mesopotamia in general. It was performed in Egypt, in China, in India, everywhere. The Lakota and the Cheyenne were dreaming and paying attention to dreams as they were trying to protect their territory. So this has been going on, and it's still going on in hunter-gatherer peoples in South America, in Australia, the Aboriginal peoples. So this is a very old technology that uses memories from the past to try to simulate the future. And this didn't start with humans. It started 220 million years ago in the mammalian lineage, and because most mammals, if not all, have REM sleep, a phase in which we have very vivid dreams. And this is something that most likely started in the daily necessity to negotiate life and death, and basically to attend to three main needs: to survive, to find something to eat, not to be eaten by anybody else, and to eventually breed. So those three, let's say, Darwinian imperatives, they govern life, they govern the interactions of animals, and they put a pressure, a very strong selective pressure on figuring out what's going to happen in the future. Now, when this started, a good 200 million years ago or more, it was something. It was an oracle, a neurobiological machine of simulation of possible futures, which was basically replaying memories from the past with some noise, and this would generate a little bit of differences in the scenario, generating emotions that would then drive behavior the next day. So it started as a very simple, based on yesterday, how's tomorrow. Now, when we see the product of millions of years of evolution of this neurobiological machine in the human historical record, which is only 4,500 years ago, we see that this notion of oracle flourished, and it became so complex, and it became so intertwined with social mechanisms of existence, with the very notion of state. So, I mean, it's not, as you mentioned, it's not just private life that was guided by it. It was the entire nation, it was the entire people guided by some memory replay with some noise. So you ask me, what is a dream? A dream is produced by the passage of electrical activity through a specific neuronal mesh, a specific sequence of neuronal assemblies that eventually encode memories. And this is done not in a free manner, but in a manner that is guided by desire, by desire and anti-desire, which is fear, or the things you fear. So based on the things you need and want and wish, and based on the things you fear, this will shape the script of the dream. Now, you can pay attention to that. You may not pay any attention to that. For most people, either they don't even recall that they have dreams every night, or when they can remember the dreams, they don't know what they mean and they forget about it immediately. But for some people that are undergoing particular stress, people that are undergoing severe disease or that lost somebody that they love or they lost their jobs or people that are experiencing this stress, they often go back to a very clear pattern of dreaming in which the dreams very strongly depict the problems the person is facing. It may be a very literal depiction. It may be an exact copy of what's going on, or it may be a very metaphorical image that nevertheless can be related to that condition. This is very clearly seen in veterans when they develop PTSD, and one of the most important symptoms is exactly the recurrence of nightmares. Now, this can be treated. This is basically the reflection of a scar, of a memory that is a scar, right? And there are several ways in which this can be approached nowadays with the whole notion of the psychedelic revolution, with especially the role of MDMA to alleviate the symptoms of PTSD. So now we're looking into a future of psychiatry that can try to ameliorate these kinds of problems. Now, it is interesting to think that the substances that seem to be most useful to deal with those traumas are substances that somehow induce a dreamlike state. So the classical psychedelics and
Yeah.
THC in cannabis as well.
It's like the consciousness or the body wants to heal itself, but it can't heal how it operates in the regular world without this subconscious data teeing it up with catalysts. And when individuals view it more like the dream state causing them harm rather than a learning experience, it prolongs those nightmares. And it's funny that when you take a psychoactive substance, like these ones you're talking about, MDMA, things of that nature, it's forcing you to go into the dreams and confront whatever this thing might be. It puts you right back into it. But the difference is you are consciously telling yourself, I'm going to take this psychoactive to come face to face with this subconscious data that is trying to tell me about a trauma. And I am taking the steps to heal it. And I think that is a very interesting aspect of this entire thing, is the confrontation, not in a negative sense, but a confrontation of learning to say that this is here and it requires the healing for me to move to the next step. And if we look at the data of all the people with, certain, mental disorders through emotional trauma that have become recurring and debilitating to the physical self, many of them can create healing when they have focus on these traumas themselves. And if you put the people in safe environments with the psychoactive substances and bring on this sort of awakened dream state where the body's still awake, but it's being moved through the same sort of REM processes, and, alpha gamma patterns that are happening in the brainwaves, puts you there in the wake world so you can say, okay, I'm here to focus on this. I have the support, I'm in the environment, and I want to find that healing. And I really do think that here's what's interesting. It's not only one of the oldest technologies, like you stated, it's also our most well-developed technology. Outside of the biological sense of ourself, this thing has been developed longer than any machine IBM or anyone else could have ever created. But we throw this technology to the wayside. And we say, let's focus on all the other stuff. Well, it's like, you have something so perfectly developed here. Why not use that tool? And we should be duly reminded, like your book says, of using this oracle. This is the thing that it gives us the personal answers to open us up to these freeing, less creative, less debilitating structures of our lives, and allows us to then focus on things that can actually propel us forward. Because if I'm not consistently focused on trauma, Siddhartha, I can then focus on possibilities or other probabilities that are better for me, my family, my social groups.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's the dichotomy between inner work and outer work. The development of capitalism requests people to work more and more and more efficiently. However, it will not grow in the best of manners if there's no inner work done, right? I mean, if you think about it, the inequality in the world has never been so big. The accumulation of capital is tremendous. The accumulation of knowledge is tremendous. Why is it that we cannot make this world a good place for everybody?
That's
I mean,
because
this is
wealth and knowledge does not mean understanding, Siddhartha. You can
yes,
have all those
because
things.
there's no inner work. Because there's no
Yes.
inner work. So what I've proposing in the book is that our difficulties in the West, in particular, with reconnecting with dreams, may be at the roots of our civilization unease. You might be maybe at the roots of us having all the means and still not finding the way. For example, just to give a simple example, if we as a species had uh, reacted to the virus, to COVID, to the emergence of COVID, in a united manner, if we had quickly all gotten vaccinated as fast as possible, irrespective of social class, irrespective of anything, we would all be better off. Now we're dealing with the consequences of a lack of cohesion in the group. Now this goes back to a long period. Actually, the most of our ancestors had to negotiate this tension between competition and cooperation. So fine, we cooperate among ourselves and we compete with everybody else. Now, so this is well known in psychology. It's the inner group, outer group dichotomy. Now, how do we deal with this at this particular moment? We're still doing that. We're still doing. Some countries are doing better. Some countries are doing worse. Some people inside some regions of a country are doing better than others. And our inability to share a dream, to share this dream. Let's dream that this thing is going to be over. Let's dream it together. Let's make it happen for everybody. Our failure to do that is costing us tremendously. And if you look at the if you look at the curve of cases, of new cases of infections in the world, it's basically a, a line like this with a very clear slope, the slope is not changing because of vaccination. Why? Because they don't work? No, they work, but they don't work well if we vaccinate people in such a heterogeneous manner, so slowly, with pockets here and there. Now we have the Delta variants. We don't know where this is going. And what I'm claiming in the book is that we need to go back to our inner world. We need to do more of our inner work and use this ancient technology, as you say very, very aptly. This is something that has been evolving for so many million years. It has been very useful for all our ancestors. It will be useful for us again if we let it be, if we let it happen. It's so natural to dream and to remember, as natural as breathing. So if we do this kind of work, we will figure that in fact we are drowning in a glass of water. That we actually have the resources. We have all the actives that we need to put together, not just in science, but also in the wisdom of traditional societies, to find the path forward, not just for our species, for the other species as well, because we cannot continue producing this sort of impact. So those are things that ecology knows about those things, but people don't feel them. They don't feel them because they're still too focused on, as you put very, very, very nicely from the beginning, you're focused on the waking life. And the waking life is a life of accumulation of things, of experiences. It's just more and more and more and more. But when do we do the homework? When is it that we learn to really find what is important in life? Find what is important in life. Is none of that. It's none of that. And all religions say it, but people are losing the connection to this. And I think our difficulty with dream work is a big part of that. People don't ask about their beloved ones' dreams. They don't say, "Oh, what was dream tonight, darling?" The parents don't do it to the children. The grandparents are not connected. It's just a big disconnection from something that was so fundamental. It's actually puzzling that we got ourselves into this position, but. And I agree with you. Let's be optimistic. Let's get out of this mess. And by that I mean let's do the inner work. Let's do what it takes. It's really about protecting ourselves. Just treat yourself well. Put yourself to bed early. Don't wake up in a hurry. Don't wake up in a hurry. Take your time. Do your dream diary.
Do you know, that's really funny because waking up in a hurry has always been one of the most detrimental things for the remembrance of my dream state. Because then my focus immediately upon waking is on the next physical activity rather than doing that reflection in a moment where I'm very relaxed. And science has shown through a great body of data that when you're in the most relaxed state, you can take a lot of new learning catalysts in, and it can do a lot more good. Things don't work well when you're uncomfortable. And you speak to looking about what that future dream is, we'll never find political or social understanding amongst ourselves if we don't understand ourselves first. How am I supposed to understand another in their culture if I don't even understand who I am or why I'm acting or feeling this specific way? But the dream data affords you the opportunity for that introspection, that you can take this model of self and then go apply it to other selves. And that's when it becomes interesting. And that's why the dream banks and things like that are like, wow, there's a lot of common themes among people. Whether, I'm a Buddhist or a Muslim or a Christian or nothing in between, we still share the same thematic approaches to our dreaming. There's something here with the collective learning that brings us all together, but we're all inherently ignoring this specific thing. So I'll use myself as an example because that's what I know best, myself. I have written well over 500 pages of specific dreams. When I had come to the realization, some moons ago, many moons ago, that 45% of my life was missed, that massive amount of that data set of the personal self, I said, I need to focus on this. And I can absolutely 100% back the data of you saying that as you begin to focus on it, you very quickly get to the point of remembering all of it. And then after that, I can even take the remembrance of it and start to apply it to my waking life and then go back and review it. And as I began to record those dreams, the quality, the depth, the realization of multiple probabilities of continuity were happening at the same time. And when I had viewed the dreams, and if someone on the outsider might look at it and say, this seems really illogical, it lacks chronology. What I found is that the dream state can actually deal with multiple chronologies and logical flows at the same time. So some people might say, that seems a little fuzzy. But in truth, it's working with different themes of learning all at one moment. And I don't know any other computer system on earth that can manage something like that. The fact that I can deal with multiple chronologies, multiple probabilities, and multiple different catalysts and logical flow, and I can dip in and out of them depending on the day or whatever happened to bring me back into that timeline, I think is fundamentally one of the greatest data sets of all time. And that's my personal data set. And it's one of the most understudied things for us. And here's the best part. It doesn't matter what religion you have or what you believe in. It's there for you. This is an agnostic learning tool. So focus on it. Use it for your benefit. Do you record your
Absolutely.
dreams?
Yes, I do. Yes, and in fact, I mean, dreams have played a big role in my life early on because of good things and bad things, and I paid a lot of attention to them throughout my life. But it was only when I was beginning PhD that they became like an object of study for me. Um, Over the years, I've been keeping dream diaries for some periods, and for some other periods, I've been just sharing them with my spouse. But what I notice is that when I pay attention, when I try hard to make sense of what's being remembered, it often illuminates ways in which I can improve my behavior. Ways in which I can be a better husband, friend, person, and also ways in which I can acquire the experiences that I desire. So it's really about understanding our own desire and understanding the consequences of our behaviors. I give you an example. When I was halfway through PhD, at some point I needed to. I was working in the field center of Rockefeller University, and I used to go there once a week. And the lab had two cars that could be used for that, and I just, I booked one of them, and I was ready to go at 7 a.m. The car wasn't there. I tell the story in my book, and then I understood that my one colleague of mine had gone to the field center and had stayed overnight, and therefore the car wasn't there. He didn't tell me. I was very angry. I lost my experiment, and I planned to meet him as soon as he arrived and scold him. But then he didn't show up. And then I went to sleep. And then I had this very vivid dream in which I would come to the lab, very realistic, and then scold him. And he would beat me up badly. And he's a huge guy. He's a big, big guy, strong guy. And then the next day I just woke up with this feeling that, okay, this is not an option. This is not how I should go about it. So I just went there and I said, hey man, it was bad for me. You ruined my experiment. He said, oh, I'm very sorry. I said, okay, it's fine. Let's keep going. Move on.
Isn't
Okay.
isn't that funny though? You afforded yourself patience. You took all the catalysts in, and you waited, for instance, 24 hours to sleep on it. And a lot of people say, "Oh, why don't you sleep on it?" And they say that just as a sort of like a social statement. People use it all the time. But there's so much baked into the comment of why don't you just sleep on it? Like, for your instance, this was something you had a lot of emotional direction into, and you were all fired up, but you gave yourself the time to digest it at the subconscious level after consciously receiving it. And then from that, you brought it then back into the physical realm for yourself to find understanding with this other PhD candidate at the same time. So instead of creating a division amongst yourself, you used the data of the waking state, digested it through your neurobiological algorithms, and then the next day you came out and you said, "You want to know something? I just want to tell you how I feel. I've come to an understanding, and there's no disrespect or hate or anything of the nature." And guess what, Siddhartha? You still got your PhD, didn't you? At the end of the day,
Absolutely.
it still turned out beneficial.
Exactly. It was just the best way forward. I think that we have to understand that during REM sleep, parts of our brain that are related to our own self, that where the memories of our lives are represented, where with the places of the brains of our brain that we use to imagine the future, to remember our past, to tell a story, they are also the parts of the brain that represent all the other folks in our minds, all the creatures of the mind, our friends, our family members, everybody's there. Even the fictional characters are there. And so this part of the brain that has this technical name of default mode network, or DMN, is strongly activated during REM sleep. And this is a moment in which the character of ourselves meets the characters of others. The representations, the mental representations, they get together, and things happen, and they happen according to the probabilities of the past. So sure, my unconscious mind knew that my colleague would not react well if I showed anger, but also it was telling me that the consequences of anger will become so bad that it would be a good idea to just reconsider. So this is a way in which you can feel the pains of others. It's a way in which you can project others onto yourself and project your actions onto others, and then simulate socially what's going to happen. If we didn't have this kind of neurobiological mechanism, we would probably be still fighting inside a cave for who has the best stone tool.
Do you know, it's you're I okay, I agree. That's obvious. Um, the what is fundamentally incredible is that the default mode network, the DMN, of being in the state within that REM cycle, it is so logical. It is perfectly logical, and it shows us that having a positive emotional state that is understanding of others and self is the logical, safest, and most evolutive path we can take. But we ignore that. It would tell you that, murdering someone is probably logically not the best thing to do. It's not of benefit for you, and it's clearly not of benefit for the other party, right? This DMN takes in so much catalyst and logically filters through it, and it tells you using the emotion in this way is most impactful to the self and others for a positive evolutive gain, which tells me that this logical underlying factor is so important for our biological evolution. I can't tell myself to stop breathing. No matter what I do, I can try and hold my breath, but I'm gonna have to grasp for air at some time because the subconscious says, no, you need to live, right? I can't tell the heart to stop beating. It's just what it does. But the other aspects of ourself confuse it, negative emotion, things of that nature, lack of understanding. Those truly are not logical flows for what's most evolutively beneficial for us. And so when I look at that, when you use the dream, it is this phenomenal supercomputer, absolutely phenomenal. and you didn't pay anything for it. It just came with you. It's this beautiful innate thing. But the thing is, we've never turned it on. A collective of us have not used it as something to be like, my goodness, let's find some sort of understanding. We put so much of our understanding in the hands of others and machines, but it lacks the true data set that is so fundamentally important for who we are. And if we can get small selves and then families to blossom with the sharing, well, then understanding becomes a compound effect. The dream state, the compounding effect of our dreams, will be so beneficial for us as a collective. It'll allow us to be emotionally healed. It'll allow us to make decisions that are best for all. It'll allow us to take more logical stances and have a growth in our ethics and behaviors that doesn't actually create harm on human, plant, or animal life. That's where that it heads. It's the natural, logical evolution of it, but we ignore it so much. So I'd want to ask you then, Siddhartha, how do you have conversations with individuals and in a simple manner bring them to focus on something that's so important, to say that this is something that you should cherish? How do you awaken them to this tool and this data set?
This is a good question, Alex, because this is a long forgotten tradition, right? Everybody in the past used to pay attention to dreams and interpret dreams, but then in the past 500 years or so, in the West in particular, this was forgotten. How do we go back to it? I think the first level is to defend sleep against light, screens, activities, sound, anger, too much exercise at night, too much food at night, alcohol at night, cannabis at night, or anything else at night. Just leave the night to the night. And this is important because many different diseases come from bad sleep. And if you sleep badly one night, the next day you have cognitive impairments. Next day you have mood problems. If you keep doing it, at some point you're going to have issues with cardiovascular issues. You may have develop diabetes. You may develop depression, and in the long run, you most likely develop Alzheimer's disease. So it's just a very long list of ills that we should not go for, and we can protect ourselves from if we properly go to sleep every night, not too late. Not people when they go to sleep late, they are really rowing. And I know you're a rowing athlete. People are going against the tide. People are rowing against the flow. Why? Because your melatonin, which is produced very nicely by your own pineal gland, if you allow yourself to, shut down all the lights and go to sleep, it will not go up if you continue to stimulate your brain with stuff. And then when you try to go to sleep at 4 a.m., your melatonin is about to go down and your cortisol is about to go up, and your body is going to feel like doing something in the morning, but then you're super tired. Your brain has not cleared all the toxic metabolites that were accumulated during waking life. So it's just wrong. We shouldn't be doing that, and companies should understand this, and everybody really, the governments, everybody should understand that if we want a healthy society, we need people to do the basics right. So sleep, nutrition, exercise, these things need to be in place. Otherwise, we will be just medicalizing conditions and complicating the situation rather than solving the situation. Now, there are many cognitive reasons why we should be getting proper sleep, right? If you get how many hours of sleep? Oh, it depends. Each person needs a different amount. But the important thing is to listen to the body. The important thing is to get what you feel you need rather than trying to adapt to some external schedule, right? Once you get that, then you get many benefits from the first half of the night as well as the second half of the night, which are very different in terms of the brain waves that occur that can be observed. So you will get to do the memory triage, which is very important, right? You need to separate every night which memories you will keep forever, very few, which memories you will forget, most of them, and which memories you will recombine or restructure to generate new ideas to be creative. So this is all the sleep's business. Then there's the emotional regulation, right? Especially the REM sleep part, the second half of the night. If you don't get that properly, then you will get cranky the next day for sure. This has been shown in many different labs. It's just a known fact. We need to get the second half of the night needs to be complete and not cut short because you need to wake up early or because you had too much alcohol and your REM sleep is gone. Because that's what happens if you drink alcohol right before going to sleep. You go to sleep quickly. The time it takes for you for sleep onset is actually shortened, but you wake up at 2 or 3 or 4 a.m. Dehydrated most probably and without the ability to going back to REM sleep. So all of that, those are benefits that not do not only apply to us humans but apply to mammals in general, and in fact to other species, to birds, to reptiles, and so on. And recently in my lab we published a paper showing that the octopus also has a state that seems like REM sleep. So this is a very general old thing. Now what is not so old is the ability to dream and share dreams. As we mentioned before, dreaming probably evolved in our mammalian lineage early on, but then the ability to share those dreams is something as recent as human language. So we don't know what we're talking about here, 300,000 years maybe, probably before in different species of hominids, but still very short period of time if we think of evolution. Now, this is really another level of complexity, and it's very complex and sophisticated, which is to reenact those memories of waking life, recombine them, but then somehow generate counterfactuals, generate scenarios of possible futures. As you say, a very complex uh, uh, um, task that computers in the world are trying to do. The forecasting is all about that, but it's very hard. It's very difficult because you need to integrate too many inputs, too many pieces of data, and you need to weight them properly. And this is we know this is really complicated. Now the brain does that, and it produces images, and those images can be super clear. But then in the human lineage, because we are so complex and we have so many words for so many things, then the complexity hits there as well. And you can have those amazing dreams that at first have no meaning whatsoever, and then as you work on them, they really make it very clear for you. I give an example, which is in the book, right? Um, when Julius Caesar was preparing to go to sleep on March 14 of the year of his death, uh, he knew that he had many enemies in the Senate, and his wife knew as well. And then they get these two dreams that are about the same phenomenon, about the same object, but very different dreams. He dreams that that he went away, he flying out of his home and then flew through the clouds and was met with a greeting from Jupiter. So very nice, beautiful dream, very powerful and awesome, in fact. His wife, Calpurnia, dreamt that the house was falling, the roof was falling, and that he was going to the Senate and was going to be stabbed by senators and would die uh, uh, in, in blood in front of her, which is exactly what happened the next day. And she tried to warn him, and he considered not going, but then he went there and died. Now, the two dreams are oracles. The two dreams are premonitory. One, his dream, very allegorical, like he was flying through the skies to meet Jupiter. So to meet a god, you need to become a god. And this is what happened when people died. People uh, made gods, right? This happened to him. The Divus Iulius was created. This god was invented after his death. Um, but of course, I mean, he had somehow repressed the concrete notion of his killing, and he, instead of having a nightmare, he had a very beautiful dream that actually made him feel good. It made him feel great. You know, I'm like the gods. But his wife was more rooted to the situation, and she had a dream that was a perfect simulation of the future that actually eventually happened. Now, if they had fled Rome, if they had gone somewhere else, maybe he would have escaped, maybe he would have survived, and history would be entirely different. Now, this is the beauty of dreams, which is that they don't tell you what's going to happen. They tell you what may happen if you don't change the course of action.
Well, I think that's because and this is my own thought on it, the dream state takes in so many catalysts, and it can logically see the most probabilistic outcomes. We have we go about our day just basic cause and effect that are occurring all the time. But when you compound cause and effect for a great body of time, something that if I were to think about it right now seems really improbable. But in retrospect, you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. But the dream state can already tie all those conclusions in perfect logical flow to what will happen in the future. So, that's an interesting part about how we look at those premonitions. It's just where probability lands through the constant, universal thread of cause and effect. And let's consider this for a second. When you wrote this book, you took so many different aspects of history, neurobiology, psychoanalysis, current computational theory, and you brought them all together. There was a general theme, there is a symbolic nature to this. And the most probabilistic outcome is this specific narrative, which has led you and I to having this conversation and then sharing that information further. And when I think about it, I would have never considered in the earliest days when I started recording my dreams that it would lead me to the moment of speaking to one of the world's foremost experts on dreams. I would have never thought about that. But the compounding effects of these things bring it all the way around. And, in retrospect, now it kind of makes some sense. And I think that's what's really interesting here. And whether you want to view it as a religious premonition, spiritual, whatever it might be, we drive this through our choices. And the digestion of the mental, very physical day is happening at night. And we require that digestion just like it takes time to digest food. The cause and effect, the input output has to maintain that balance. But in our modern society, we're not affording ourselves that sort of balance. And when reading your book and looking through the research, you're reminding us of that balance. You're reminding us of that state of learning, that level of importance. And that's why I thought I need to talk to Sidarta, because this is such an understudied and socially undervalued subject that has been so important that needs to be brought back. People need to focus on this. Science needs to study it. If you want to create better supercomputers, understand the dream state. If you want to see what a utopia looks like, understand the dream state. If you want to really understand social determinants of health for keeping people healthy, you need to understand the dream state. But it starts with the self. And I love that piece of data, and so I could go on about this, all day, frankly. How is it?
Can
What? Go
can
ahead.
I say something to you? Because you made me think of a specific aspect which is important to mention. We never experienced such a fast accumulation of new knowledge. However, children still need to learn the basics. They still need to go from the beginning and learn to read and write and learn arithmetics and then and algebra and so on. So the amount of stuff to be learned is increasing. If we don't enhance, if we don't make the learning be faster, we will just see a disconnection increase between the frontier of knowledge and the general population. So one important aspect of the research in the past 20 years in my lab, but in many other labs, in the world, is that we need to embrace sleep and dreaming in the school environment, not just for toddlers, for everybody. I've been showing in my laboratory, we recently published a paper in Current Biology showing that we can get children to read 2 times faster than they would if we get them to do 3 weeks of specific training with naps, with post-training naps. And if the naps are not there, they learn after 3 weeks, but they go back after 4 months. So they basically get nowhere. Now, we need to understand that sleep is important to consolidate memories. And if children go to sleep in the morning, and if they go to school in the morning, if children go to school in the morning, and if they go to sleep only at night, most likely they will forget most of that stuff. And it happens all the time. It happens with the people that ace the exams in the best Ivy League schools in the country. They will not remember most of the stuff a year or 2 years later because of the way that the learning is happening, which is a 1 or 2 exams only, and they tend to stay up late at the last night trying to get all the memories together to deliver the memories. Instead of keeping the memories, they're delivering the memories. And the inner work with those memories, and the ability to learn and sleep, more ecological cycles of learning, this is really missing. We'll need that if we want the general population to learn, to go together with the expansion of knowledge that is happening right now.
Do you know, the employees I work with, family members, friends, they always shit on me because I take a lot of naps. I do. I'm a very heady I'm a very heady individual, right? I'm constantly thinking, and I know that thinking takes up about 33% of my caloric intake for the day too. There's so much information for me to ingest. If I don't take a nap, I shut down. I actually have a hard time processing the rest of my day. So I have this almost like this ebb and flow constantly up and down of napping and being awake so I can really digest so much material. Like for instance, when I'm speaking with you, I'm really learning a lot about you. It's a lot of information and I have to stitch certain aspects of the conversation together to then come to this sort of narrative and speech and how I round out that thought and explain it. It requires a lot of mental work for me, right? But if I really want to remember what has happened, I do have to nap. Like the dream is like the larger part of it, right? But my napping is like me snacking throughout the day. I snack constantly and I love to nap. But I found that those things are most beneficial to keeping me in a nice equalized state so I can continue that learning. I have a great memory retention because of that napping factor. It's like giving me those little micro doses to like, boost the hard drive or whatever it might be before I, really shut the computer off for the night, right? Cool everything
Yeah,
down. Yeah.
and it's all inner world. It's all very healthy, very sane. No,
Yeah.
adverse effects. It's yourself.
So, so what is it that you would want to leave for all the listeners? If would it be scientific or personal? It doesn't matter what it is. What would be like a final message for them regarding this dream state, regarding your book, whatever it might be?
Well, I think my message is that we should align ourselves with our past so that we can dream a future. In our past, we were very good at sleep and dreaming, and we paid a lot of attention to both of them, and we shared everything about these activities with our family members, with our friends. This is how our ancestors developed all the civilizations and developed all the culture that we have. Right now, we are experiencing a crisis, and it's a crisis of knowing a lot but not having the wisdom to live with it. And the world is in a big crisis. We cannot deny it. We have to see that the way forward is not more competition, it's more cooperation. The way forward is not going to be more competition because the world is a closed system. The world is a closed system. We need to face it. We have to live here, and it's many different peoples. We need to respect each other. We need to learn about each other, and this is going to be much easier if we can dream and share dreams. If we continue to focus on the waking life, on the external life, and not on the inner world, on the inner life, we will continue to have trouble, and this trouble will hit everywhere. It's hitting everywhere already. It's hitting the richest countries in the world. Germany was completely overwhelmed with floods that were predictable, but people couldn't predict them. And this has to do with how we feel about things. Science is already showing us this, but people need to feel those things, not just understand them. And to feel them, we need to go back to dreams.
And it gives us our wisdom, right?
I think so.
Listen, Siddhartha, this has been a gem, like really a lot of fun. And I'll go back and I'm gonna have to re-listen to all this because there are some micro thematic things that you wrote about and spoke about that I think I would love to unpack further with you.
It will be a pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.